Hi, good morning everyone. This is Norlin Salongan together with my colleagues Ariana Usman and Rastraida Muhammad. We are going to discuss about the different parts of the brain. But before we dive deeper into the topic, we would like you to be conscious of our subject first, which is physiological or biological psychology. So, what do you know about the subject physiological or biological psychology? Anyone? Thank you for sharing your thoughts. In accordance with our reference, biological psychology is not only a field of study, and it is also a point of view, and it holds the proper way to understand behavior in terms of how it evolved and how the functioning of the brain and other organs controls behavior. We think and act as we do because we have certain brain mechanism, and we evolved those brain mechanism because ancient animals with this mechanism survive and reproduce better than animals with other mechanism. That means biological psychology concerns brain functioning. Lahat ng ginagawa natin, ginagamitan ng utak para mag-function lahat ng katawan at isip natin. And also, biological psychology address fascinating issues that should excite anyone who is curious about nature. But for us, we prefer the term biopsychology because it denotes a biological approach to the study of psychology rather than a psychological approach to the study of biology. Physiological psychology is the division of biopsychology that studies the neural mechanisms of behavior through the direct manipulation and recording of the brain in controlled experiments. So here in our presentation, this is a sample view of human brain, which everyone has it, right? This is from the dorsal view or the top view, and from the bottom or ventral view sa ilalim. So neurons here are the cells that receives and transmit electrochemical signals, and the complexity of the human brain is hardly surprising considering what it can do. Kayang pumunta sa outer space, kayang gumawa ng plane para makapunta sa sky, kayang gumawa ng building, at kayang magchismis. So, kidding aside. So, brain here contains around 100 billion neurons and another trillion glial cells. Even more amazing is that each neuron has an average of 10,000 connections with other neurons. From that complexity arises the command and control of our bodies. Sabi nga nila, 10% lang yung ginagamit natin or yung gumagana sa utak natin. How much more pag 100% na? Pero in reality, wala naman evidence or wala naman makapagpapatunay na 10% lang talaga yung ginagamit natin. Well, in fact, there are imaging studies clearly demonstrate that we use nearly every part of the brain. So, in this presentation, we will be conscious about brain's different parts. So, the brain receives information through our senses: sight, touch, taste, smell, and hearing. This information is processed in the brain, allowing us to give the meaning to the input it receives. So, the brain controls all functions of the body, interprets information from the outside world, and defines who we are as individuals and how we experience the world. The primary purpose of this chapter is to introduce you to the different parts of the brain, pero balatan muna natin siya so bago natin makita yung actual brain. So, meninges ang tawag sa nakapalibot na connective tissue membrane sa utak at spinal cord natin. Yung meninges yung nagpo-protect din sa brain natin para hindi basta-basta ma-damage. The three meningeal membranes are: first is the dura mater, next is arachnoid mater, 3 is pia mater. The most superficial and thickest membrane is the dura mater, which is composed of dense irregular connective tissue. The next here is meningeal membrane, is the arachnoid mater, and the arachnoid mater is a very thin, wispy membrane that lies just beneath the dura mater. The next here is the third is the meningeal layer. The pia mater is bound very tightly to the surface of the brain. So the brain and the spinal cord, or the central nervous system or CNS, are the most protective organs in the body. They are encased in bone and covered by three protective membranes. The three meninges kaya napaka-delicate ng brain natin. The next slide here is the nervous system. The vertebrate nervous system is composed of two divisions, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, but we are only focused in central nervous system here. Roughly speaking, the central nervous system or CNS is the division of the nervous system located within the skull and spine. So, para maintindihan natin yung nervous system, kailangan natin suriin muna yung cells na bumubuo dito. At the microscopic level, we find two kinds of cells, that is the neurons and the glia. So, kung akala natin cellphone lang ang pwede magdala ng message, mali tayo sa part na yan. Kasi yung nerve cell natin, nagre-receive ng information at nagtatransmit din sa ibang cells. Yung glia naman, this is the smaller than neurons and these have many functions but do not convey information over great distances. The adult human brain contains approximately 100 billion neurons, according to William and Harrop, 1988. Pero depende yan sa tao kasi may tendency na namamatay yung neurons natin. And yung sa nervous system natin, kinokontrol niya lahat ng ginagawa natin, simula sa paglalakad natin hanggang sa pagpapalit ng tibok ng puso natin, pati paghinga natin at kung paano tayo mag-solve ng simple or complicated problems. The activities of neuron and glia somehow produce an innermost world and behavior and experience. Santiago Ramon E. Cajal, pioneer of neuroscience, he used newly developed staining techniques to show that a small gap separates the tip of a neuron's fiber from the surface of the next neuron. His detailed drawing of nervous system are still considered today. Camillo Golgi stained nerve cells with silver salts. Ito yung method na ito, yung nilalagyan niya ng stain yung single cell ng silver salt, ay patuloy na ginagamit until now ng mga researcher para ma-examine yung single cell nang hindi naapektuhan yung ibang cell. Itong mga scientists na ito, kilala sila sa field ng neuroscience dahil sa contribution nila about sa cells, and sila yung main founder ng neuroscience. So these are the parts of the brain: the cerebrum, the brainstem, the diencephalon, and the cerebellum. And let's discuss it one by one to further understand this topic. Next is cerebrum. It controls perception, thought, memory, emotion, and conscious motor activity, can override most other systems. The cerebrum is the part of the brain that most people think of when the term brain is mentioned. The cerebrum accounts for the largest portion of the total brain weight, which is about 1,200 grams in females and 1,400 grams in males. Dito, pag malaki yung tao, malaki rin ang utak niya, pero hindi ibig sabihin na matalino na siya. Yung cerebrum ay nahati sa dalawang hemisphere, the left and the right hemisphere, which controls different functions. And now let me explain how cerebrum structure and how does it function. For the structure, the cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres, the left and the right, connected by a bundle of nerve called corpus callosum. Just imagine cerebrum as the CEO ng ating utak. Since it's the largest part of, obviously it does all the complex tasks. Next is thinking and planning. The cerebrum is where the magic of high-level thinking occurs. Tinutulungan ka nitong magplano sa araw-araw mong gawain, gaya ng paano mo isolve yung problema mo, komplikado man ito or hindi. At yung cerebrum din yung responsible sa mga decision natin. Every time you try to study for your upcoming test or nag-uumpisa ka mag-budget, it's your cerebrum that's working. Next is feeling and interacting. It controls your emotion at tumutugon sa mga sensory experiences. For example, pag kino-compliment ka ng kaibigan mo and you feel unhappy about it, or when you feel sad after watching a sad movie, ang mga emosyon na yun ay pinaprocess ng cerebrum, plus it helps you interpret what you see, hear, and touch. Next is language superpower. Sa mga moment na nag-usap ka kasama ang mga kaibigan o nagbabasa ng libro, Abala ang cerebrum sa pagtulong sa iyo na maintindihan at makipag-communicate. Kadalasan ang left side ang humahawak sa language para ma-express mo ang thoughts at feeling mo ng maayos. Next is the function. Higher cognitive functions involves planning, abstract thinking, and complex decision-making. Motor control, the motor cortex located in the frontal lobe, is crucial for voluntary movement. Sensory analysis, ang sensory cortex na nasa parietal lobe ay nag-interpret ng impormasyon mula sa ating mga senses. Next is language and communication. Ang mga area gaya ng Broca's at Wernicke sa left hemisphere ay nagmamanage ng language production at comprehension. So here in this slide, this is the superior view of the two hemisphere, right and left hemisphere. This is the lateral view of the left cerebral hemisphere showing the lobes. Each cerebral hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes, 4 of which are named for the skull bones overlying them. The frontal lobe here is important in voluntary motor function, motivation, aggression, the sense of smell, and mood. The anterior region called the prefrontal cortex is involved in personality and decision making. This is responsible for reasoning, planning, problem solving, emotion regulation, and controlling behavior and movement. Next is the parietal lobe. This is the major center for receiving and evaluating most sensory information except for smell, hearing, taste, and vision. The frontal and parietal lobes are separated by the central sulcus. Parietal lobe here processes sensory information such as touch, temperature, and pain, and helps with spatial orientation. Next is the temporal lobe, which receives and evaluates input for smell and hearing and plays an important role in memory. Its anterior and inferior portion are associated with such brain function as abstract thought and judgment. The temporal lobe is separated from the rest of the cerebrum by a lateral fissure. Temporal lobe plays a key role in auditory processing, language comprehension, and memory formation. Next is the occipital lobe, function in receiving and integrating visual input and is not distinctly separate from the other lobes. Occipital lobes here dedicated to visual processing and interpretation. Next here is the diencephalon. This is the interbrain that connects the brainstem to the cerebrum, and it has many relay and homeostatic function as listed under each subdivision. The diencephalon is the part of the brain between the brainstem and the cerebrum, and diencephalon here is a small part of the brain. Nakikita ito sa pinakagitna ng brain natin, hindi siya masyadong makita dahil sa liit nito. Its main components are the thalamus, subthalamus, epithalamus, and hypothalamus. So in this next presentation or the slide, you can see the images of thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, and the subthalamus. The thalamus here helps with sensory perception, sleep cycle, and motor function. The thalamus relays signals to and from the brain and body. Next is the epithalamus. This assists with the sense of smell and regulating sleep. Next is the hypothalamus, which helps manage your body temperature, hunger and thirst, mood plus blood pressure and sleep. And the subthalamus here is responsible for movement. So let's dive deeper into the definition of thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus, and also the subthalamus. First in the list here is the thalamus. This is the major sensory relay center and influences mood and movement. Thalamus is by far the largest part of the diencephalon, constituting about 4/5 of its weight. The thalamus is considered the sensory relay center of the brain, with only one exception. All sensory neuron project to the brain first synapse in the thalamus. The exception is the olfactory neurons, which project directly to the cerebral cortex, and the thalamus also influences mood and action associated with strong emotions such as fear and rage. Next is the hypothalamus, major control center for maintaining homeostasis and regulating endocrine function. Hypothalamus here is the most inferior portion of the diencephalon, and it contains a cluster of small nuclei and tracts. The most conspicuous nuclei, called the mammillary bodies, appear as bulges on the ventral surface of the diencephalon. They are involved in olfactory reflexes and emotional responses to odors. They may also be involved in memory, and the hypothalamus is a central controller of the endocrine system. A funnel-shaped stalk, the infundibulum, extends from the floor of the hypothalamus and connects it to the pituitary gland, and the paraventricular nucleus and supraortic nucleus of the hypothalamus regulate the pituitary gland's secretion of hormones, which influence function as diverse as metabolism, reproduction, responses to stressful stimuli, and urine production. So the hypothalamus receives and coordinates the responses to sensory input from multiple systems. Sensory neurons that terminate the hypothalamus provides input from internal organs, taste receptor of the tongue, the limbic system, which is involved in many activities including responses to smell, and specific cutaneous areas such as the nipples and external genitalia and the eyes. The different fibers from the hypothalamus extends into the brainstem and the spinal cord, where they synapse with neurons of the autonomic nervous system. In this way, the hypothalamus serves as the major coordinating center of the autonomic nervous system. This connection regulates functions such as heart rate and digestive activities, and in addition to regulating autonomic function, other hypothalamic efferent fibers extend through the infundibulum to the posterior portion of the pituitary gland. Some hypothalamic fibers extend to trigeminal and facial nerve nuclei to help control the muscles involved in swallowing, and some extend to motor neurons of this spinal cord to stimulate shivering. Hypothalamic nuclei can directly control body temperature by stimulating sweating or shivering, and hypothalamic nuclei are also involved in controlling thirst, hunger, sex drive, and our biological clock. In particular, they are very important in a number of functions related to mood, motivation, and emotion. Sensations such as sexual pleasure, relaxation after a meal, rage, fear are related to hypothalamic functions. This is the reason that strong emotional experiences may affect a person's desire or ability to eat, drink, or experience sexual pleasure, and vice versa. Input from the eyes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus helps establish the rhythm of our light-dark cycle. Further interaction between the hypothalamus and the reticular activating system in the brainstem coordinate the sleep-wake cycle. Next is the epithalamus. It contains nuclei involved in motivation and reward behavior and contains pineal gland. Epithalamus here is a small area superior and posterior to the thalamus, and it consists of the habenula and the pineal gland. The habenula is involved in motivational control of behavior. It plays an integral role with the limbic system, basal nuclei, and other brain regions in behaviors that involve rewards and subsequent addictions. The pineal gland or pineal body is shaped somewhat like a pinicone, from which the name pineal is derived, and pineal gland function in humans are not fully understood, but they involve modulation of the sleep-wake cycle and other biorhythms. Next here is the subthalamus. It contains nerve tract and nuclei And the subthalamus is a small area immediately inferior to the thalamus. It contains the subthalamic nuclei and several ascending and descending tracts. The subthalamic nuclei are function part of the subcortical basal nuclei that are involved in controlling motor functions. Cerebellum here controls muscle movement and tone, governs balance, regulates extent of intentional movement involved in learning motor skills. The cerebellum, also known as little brain, is attached to the brainstem posterior to the pons, and the cerebellum has a gray cortex and nuclei with white medulla in between. Cerebellum here is a part of your brain that helps coordinate and regulate a wide range of functions and processes in both your brain and body. The cerebellum here consists of three parts: a small inferior flocculonodular lobe, which is the simplest part of the cerebellum. It helps control balance and eye movement. Next is a central vermis. The medial portion of the lateral hemisphere are involved in controlling posture, locomotion, and fine motor coordination, thereby producing smooth flowing movements. Next is two large lateral hemisphere. The major portion of the lateral hemisphere of the cerebellum function in concert with the frontal lobes of the cerebral cortex in planning, practicing, and learning complex movements. Each lateral hemisphere is divided by a primary fissure into an anterior lobe and a posterior lobe. The lobes are subdivided into lobules, which contains the fovea. Remarkably, the cerebellar cortex contains more neurons than the entire cerebellar cortex. These neurons include stellate, basket, granule, Golgi, and Purkinje cell. The cerebral cortex also contains mossy fibers, which are afferent axons from elsewhere in the brain that branch extensively within the cerebellum. Purkinje cells are the largest cells in the CNS. Each Purkinje cell receives about 200,000 synapses from passing fibers. Purkinje cells are inhibitory neurons and are the only cerebellar cortex neurons that sends axons to the cerebellar nuclei. The cerebellum communicates with other regions of the CNS through three large tracts called cerebellar peduncles. The superior, middle, and inferior cerebellar peduncles connects the cerebellum to the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata respectively. So here in brainstem, it connects the spinal cord to the cerebrum, consists of the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain, with the reticular formation scattered throughout the three regions as many important functions. As listed under each subdivision is the location of cranial nerve nuclei. The brainstem here is the region of the brain that connects the spinal cord to the base of the rest of the brain. The brainstem consists of three anatomical divisions. From inferior to superior, that is the medulla oblongata, pons, and the midbrain. In addition to these anatomical divisions, the reticular formation is a functional unit that spans all three divisions. The brainstem here is responsible for many essential functions. Damage to small areas often cause death because many reflexes essential for survival are integrated in the brainstem, whereas relatively large areas of the cerebrum or cerebellum may be damaged without life-threatening consequences. The functions of the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain and reticular formation are summarized in this table. So in this slide, the structure of brainstem, pons, midbrain, and medulla oblongata. Pons here contains ascending and descending nerve tract release information between cerebrum and cerebellum, and this is also site of reflex centers. Midbrain here contains ascending and descending nerve tract, serve as visual reflex center, part of auditory pathway. Third is the medulla oblongata, pathway for ascending and descending nerve tract, center for several important reflexes, example heart rate, breathing, swallowing, and vomiting. Vital bodily functions, bones, midbrain, and medulla oblongata. Brainstem lies in front of the cerebellum and anchors the brain to the spinal cord, collection of structure that includes the pons, a mass of nerve fibers that carry sensory info, and the midbrain, a region of fibers and structure that help control investment along with auditory and visual processing, medulla oblongata, which creates more and sensory pathways between the midbrain and the pons and the spinal cord. These three control vital bodily functions such as cardiac activity, digestion, respiration, and sleep. So, how to take care of your brain? These four different parts of the brain, which are cerebrum, diencephalon, brainstem, and cerebellum, works in sync to ensure bodily functions are fully operational. The brain has even evolved mechanism to protect itself, and one such mechanism is the blood-brain barrier, a semi-permeable cellular wall that only allows specific chemicals to enter from the body's bloodstream into the brain. Despite this protection, tumor and other complications can lead to life-threatening problems and disease in the brain, such as dementia. Thankfully, scientists have found ways to improve brain health. Staying physically active and eating a balanced diet may preserve cognitive functions and even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Protect your brain and eat healthy. So, these are some fun facts about the brain that some of us knew while others don't. So this is Dagmar Turner, a 52 years old orchestra violinist, and she has brain tumor located near an area that controls spine movement. She was concerned that the surgery would affect her music, so neurosurgeons at King's College Hospital in London, where they performed the brain surgery, had Turner played during the procedures, helping them remove as much of the tumor as possible without damaging her ability to play. And the surgery here was successfully processed or successfully done. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys learned from us. And if you have questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to ask. Thanks, and that's it.